Oh, okay. There are people online?
We have three people online.
Okay. All right, well, welcome. Glory to Jesus Christ. And we'll start with the prayer as always. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of Truth, you are everywhere present and fill all things, treasure blessings and give of life. Come and dwell within us, cleanse us of all stains, save our souls, O gracious Lord. In the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Before I go into love and responsibility, I find myself touting this book. It's called Benedict XVI and Beauty in Sacred Art and Architecture. It's a must read. What it is, really, it's not a book by him. It's a book of essays from, it was a conference on liturgy. These essays are the proceedings of the Second FOTA International Liturgical Conference in 2009. But this has just come out. You can get it from here, hopefully eventually, from the Daughters of St. Paul. But it's a collection of essays, and one of the persons who contributed to this is locally here. Her name is Helen Ratner Dietz. And she wrote an essay, which of course is of great interest to us, our purposes here, and that is the nuptial meaning of classic church architecture. See, here's what's happening, especially for those of you in the Latin Rite, with the changes coming in on your liturgy, the little changes. There's really something very profound behind all that. And this is the Benedict putting the church on course for a kind of a reform of the reformed, in a sense. And in other words, I think Benedict is to liturgy what John Paul was to the theology of the body. And everything he's ever written, especially before he was Pope, and of course during Pope, ought to be read in terms of liturgy. I know I've taught his other book, Spirit of the Liturgy, that's a must read. And this also is wonderful because what's happening is, and this is one of my favorite things, one of my reasons for behind everything I do, my message, is that all of this we're doing here, the theology of the body, and this, are all wedded together. In other words, it is really, the key is in rediscovering the sacramental liturgical worldview, seeing how everything is integrated, how liturgy and everything about it, from the architecture, the art, the liturgical prayers, the text, gestures, everything, as these essays will show you, everything works together and expresses this one basic fundamental spousal mystery. It's all played out in liturgy, and this is where we find the context of our being man and woman, of the context of everything. So what Benedict does is he does a marvelous job in his own way of sort of picking up, in a sense, the whole theology of the body thing, but in his own way, in his own kind of more linear way, a way of showing how it is expressed and lived out in liturgy. And that, as he says, and he's committed to, if you get the Mass right, in other words, think of the Eucharist, think of the altar, that's the bedroom of the church, in a sense. It's the mystical bedroom. And just as you get the bedroom right in marriage, in sacramental marriage, because the bedroom is sort of like the Eucharist of marriage, of sacramental marriage. It's the source and summit. Everything flows in and out of what happens in the most intimate act between man and woman, husband and wife. So too, the most intimate act between God and us is the Eucharist. So to get things right in the bedroom gets everything right. To get things right in the Mass and Eucharist is to get everything right. If something goes wrong there, everything else goes wrong, because it informs all of life. It gives us a vision of life, the proper right vision of life, and it's where we come to celebrate, to sum up life. See, everything flows in and out of the Eucharist. Eucharist tells us how to see life, and the Eucharist is also then the summation or celebration of all of life. So it's everything. And so what happens here it's just a whole endless universe of meaning. And this is what these essays will help us to realize, because it talks about art, architecture, music, how they're supposed to be, why they were this way, what was behind them, and our connection with the Old Testament temple. It shows the whole continuity. Again, the great why behind everything the church did and still does. It just has to rediscover some of it. And then everything else will make sense as well, because what you experience in church is the liturgical context for what you experience in life, and all that we're saying in the Theology of the Body. So anyway, a plug for the book, not just for the book itself, because this book really contributes to what we're trying to do here, our whole message here, our whole mission. Yeah, it's called Benedict XVI and Beauty and Sacred Art and Architecture, with a wonderful article by a local contributor. I'll pass it around. I just am when I read it, I'm just like levitating. It's just everything that's I could ever want to be said about liturgy and worship and how it all works together with the whole spousal mystery. It's just marvelous, just marvelous. Can't say enough about it. Any of Benedict's writings on liturgy. So the church is in very, very good hands right now, especially in any kind of liturgical development, any changes. Trust this Pope. And as an Eastern Catholic, coming from the Eastern perspective, which liturgy is very central to us, I can tell you that because of where Benedict is coming from on this area of liturgy, Eucharist worship, he has made great strides towards ecumenism with the Orthodox. The Orthodox are really standing up and listening. Ooh, this guy's impressive. We like what he's saying. They like his whole approach. Okay, so this is very, very significant, all this. Okay, so in Love and Responsibility now, back to John Paul II, or when he was Kara Wojtyła, Bishop Kara Wojtyła. We left off last time with the whole subject of shame, and that's one of the hallmark contributions of John Paul and this whole idea of sexual morality and all that. The idea of shame, he walks around through that. And we talked about what shame means, that there's actually a good aspect to it. It's a protective aspect. And of course there's the negative. And where shame is appropriate, where it is not appropriate. And one of the points we made is that the human body in and of itself can never be seen as wrong or dirty or bad or immodest in and of itself. That rather is the presentation and the context, the presentation and the viewing of how it is given, how it is received. That's the key. And that goes along with art, with live human bodies, with any presentation of the human body. The key is the shame comes in as a way to protect its modesty, to protect its gift, to protect its theology, not because it's bad. And shamelessness, when you're shameless, you have no shame, it's because we do not have the sense of the theology of the body, the value of the body. So it's not the body itself, it's our how we see it, how it's presented. And so shame has a double significance. It came about as a result of the fall, but at the same time, it's like such a paradox in itself. At the same time, it's a protective thing. It's a negative thing because shame wasn't there before, the original sin. But then it's a positive thing because it's our sense that there is something very special about the body and sexuality, and to present it in any way that's not holy and special is going to be something we know just isn't right, and so we have a sort of a shame about it. Shame is a tendency uniquely characteristic of the human person to conceal sexual values sufficiently to prevent them from obscuring the value of person as such. Okay, that's one of the key points of last time. In other words, shame, that's on page 187 of your book. 187. It's in italics. Anything in italics, characteristically, John Paul II really wants you to know. That's important for him. Shame is a tendency uniquely characteristic of the human person to conceal sexual values sufficiently to prevent them from obscuring the value of person as such. The purpose of this tendency is self-defense of the person, which does not wish to be an object to be used by another, whether in practice or merely in intention, but does wish to be an object of love. So shame is a protective thing. That's why we feel it, because we have looked at it, the body. We can look at the body as an object. We can reduce it. We can banalize it. This is what happened in original sin. And like Scripture said, they looked at each other naked, but now they were ashamed. That represented a whole different. So because they were ashamed, they covered up, protected. In other words, Eve could not trust Adam's gaze anymore, nor could Adam trust Eve's gaze anymore. Okay, so now today we're going to go into, on page 194, the problems of continence, self-control, and now it's such a big difference in a word with one letter. Objectivization. The word is objectivization, or objectivization, not objectification. So it's a Z and not a C. It's very important, because I was reading this. At first I was confused. I realized, wait a minute, I'm reading it. I was one letter off, it's not a common word, objectivization. In other words, object meaning objective truth in this sense. Objectification is where you treat something as an object. But we're talking today about objectivizing. In other words, coming to an objective truth. Okay, so it's an important distinction. So in 184, in the first part of this chapter, we pointed out that the practice of the virtue of chastity is very closely connected with the cardinal virtue which St. Thomas Aquinas, following Aristotle, called temperantia. The function of that virtue is to moderate the promptings of concupiscence, hence it may be called moderation. In sexual matters, we must consider particularly the capacity for self-control, the form which moderation takes in this context. The chaste man is a self-controlled man. Now, one thing as we go through this, one thing that's very important that you'll see woven through all this is, once again, John Paul II is going to give us the right balance of these words and these perspectives. Continence, chastity, modesty is not about avoiding, turning away, seeing the physical or the body as inherently an occasion and always an occasion for potential lust and sin. He's going to say that we take the raw material of love, we take that, yes, the sensual, the sentimental, so on, but with continence, we moderate that so that it's, once again, as always, his constant theme, it's the preservation of the person, the personalistic norm. Okay, so he's not saying that in order to preserve that, we have to therefore never look at the body, or always see it as bad, always see it as wrong, and love is always dangerous, and feelings are always. He's going to say all that raw material, as he said all along, all that raw material is good. It has to be, once again, in context. It has to be moderated by continence, self-control, so that it always ends up that we're seeing, appreciating, relating to a person above all else, above all other things, how strong they are, how strong feelings are, attractions, whatever, concupiscence, whatever, it's the person. And so all raw material is not bad. It's just that it has to be balanced. So that's a very important point, because the tendency in our culture is to go one way or the other. Well-meaning, especially well-meaning Christians, Catholics, they have almost a basic distrust of the body and anything related to that. And on the other hand, it's just like, oh, it's just, the whole sexual revolution and anything goes. Very typical of our pendulum propensity. Gee, we're here or here, here or here. Once again, John Paul is all about the balance, the both and. And that, by the way, is the Catholic ethos. It's integration, balance. Okay. Further down the page, 194. A man must control the concupiscence of the body, but it must endeavor to control it at the moment when it makes itself felt and demands satisfaction, defiance of reason. And what reason recognizes right and truly good. For it is assumed that reason knows the objective order of nature, or at least can and should know it. Conformity to the dictates of reason is thus at the same time a condition of the observance of the natural order and a condition of probity in action. Okay, conformity to the dictates of reason at the same time a condition of observance of the natural order. Okay, therein lies the whole ethos of the Catholic morality. It's about looking at the order of things and simply following that order. In other words, being true to that order. The principle of probity in action is fundamentally incompatible with the principle of expediency favored by the utilitarians. The dignity of person demands control of concupiscence. Okay, the bottom of the page. This way of looking at the question of self-control derives mainly from the perfectionist tendency in ethics. There is no contradiction between this and the general drift of our argument. Although we have put the main emphasis on love for the person, on which the whole analysis of chastity and its rehabilitation in this work has also been based. Okay, now, once again, italics. Control of concupiscence has as its objective not only the perfection of the person who attempts to achieve it, but also the realization of love in the world of persons. Wow. And especially in relationships between persons of different sex. Okay, control of concupiscence has as its objective not only the perfection of the person who attempts to achieve it. Okay, and it's included in that. Okay, control of concupiscence. Yeah, we want to be pure, right? We want to be pure. But that's not the end in itself. It also has the realization of love in the world of persons, and especially in relation between persons of different sex. In other words, this is a very good thing for the celibates, in a sense, you know. It's not about, I avoid this, I choose to be pure and away from that which is lesser, and I never see that or come in contact with, and I keep myself pure, therefore I'm justified and I'm pure. That's not the goal. The goal is self-control for love of persons. To love, to be free to love, yes, even a celibate way. Not just because, well, I don't look at this, I don't see this, I don't experience this, and therefore I'm clean and pure and above it all. That's not the point of it. It's part of it, but it's not the point of it. The point of it is always, how do we love as real persons? That's really why we want to be self-controlled. We want to be self-controlled not just for the sake of, well, I'm clean and pure, and so I don't make sin. When I die, I'll go to heaven because I didn't do that sin over there. I didn't look at that dirty, bad thing over there. That's not it. It's how did you love? Did you love?
There's also like that kind of single approach is like very individualistic.
Yes, very yes.
And the Holy Father is saying, you know, we're all about community here.
Exactly.
It's striking because we're such an individualistic culture.
Right. Yes, individualistic. Right. Exactly. And a lot of this individualism, and this is a good point, Sister Min, and we always have to, those who are listening, you know, always, we have to be perceiving how our basic ethos is, when it's not really Catholic. And it's not our fault because we're brought up, as you see, in a culture that is basically utilitarian and individualistic and pragmatic and Protestant. It's not Catholic in a sense. So it can become very, it loses a very important dimension. It's about how we are in communion, as Sister said, communion in a relationship. That's our goal. In other words, I am celibate, Sister is celibate, so that we can love more. Not avoid it. You know, we should be able to feel and sense the same as anyone else. You know, sensuality, in terms of a raw material. We should be able to see and perceive what is beautiful. But this is where you bring in the continence part, the real continence part. You see and experience that, but with the idea of what it's really all about, that it's about a person and how to love that person. You don't say, oh, I can't look at that or see that experience, that shame on me because I'm celibate. No, you're not like some inhuman piece of dry wood. And see, what happens is, this is why there was a rebellion against that. See, and we have to be very careful in this day and age that we're not going to retreat to that as a reaction to the reaction. The first reaction was the sexual revolution, to this kind of individual prudery and all that. Now we have to be careful we don't go the opposite way. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Always have to watch out for that Manichaeism and prudishness, as well as, of course, the licentiousness that anything goes. Okay, so again, true ideas, true meaning of words. What is this whole idea of continence? It's not, and this is where I go out on a limb, but this is the threshold you have to cross. It's not just cuss the eyes, don't look at that. This is part of it. But there's a threshold, but you never cross a threshold. There's something that's keeping you. See, you got something that's stopping you. No, right. Nothing bad is coming in, so-called bad, is coming in, but you're not going anywhere either. You have to be able to cross that threshold and not just say, oh, I don't look at that, but rather, I see it, but I look at it correctly. That's the threshold. Is it risky? Yes. But what is its direction? Its direction is true holiness, true purity of heart, true humanness, true love, true life, not lifelessness. Okay. Let's go at 195. We still have to discuss the problem of moderation. If we have the last paragraph in 195. If we have a realistic conception of man, we must acknowledge that both sensual excitability and sentimental susceptibility are natural to him. See that? Put it in street terms, wow, they got a great body. Or, gee, I have feelings for that person. Those are natural. Okay, they're like raw material. Fundamentally constant with his nature, and therefore do not fundamentally contradict the realization of love in the world of persons, especially love that which unites man and the woman. It is in this light that we solve the problem of moderation, without which the virtue of chastity in the relationship between such persons does not exist. By moderation, we mean the ability to find that mean in the control of, M-E-A-N, find the mean, in the control of sensual excitability and sentimental impressionability, which in each concrete case, in every interpersonal configuration or situation, will best facilitate the realization of love and avoid the danger of exploitation, which, as we have seen, can very easily be the result not only of sensual but of emotional reactions too. Okay, get it? In other words, it's not just I feel this. It's neither I feel this, I'm attracted to this. I mean, I really, really feel that. I'm really attracted to it, and therefore I go with it. Nor is it, I don't want to feel that. I can't look at that. That's wrong. That's bad. Neither one is right. It's, here's the raw material. You feel, attract. That's natural. What do you do with it? That's the key. That's the thing that brings you to what I keep calling a true purity of heart. A true purity of heart. And a true humanness. Living and loving. Not running and avoiding. So I personally will be pure. Moderation, however, is not the same thing as a medium capacity for sensual or sentimental reactions. If it were people who were naturally unresponsive to sensual or emotional stimuli, the hyposensitive would automatically be moderate. Moderation is not mediocrity. Now, this is what a lot of people found lacking in their perception of religious life. That it's just, because sometimes when I ask, like audiences, kids, teens, you want to be a priest? And they'll say, no, I say, why not? Well, it seems like they're kind of boring. They're sensing it as mediocre, as mundane, as not exciting. Moderation is not mediocrity, but the ability to maintain one's equilibrium and the stirrings of concupiscence. This equilibrium must provide the inner gauge for one's feelings, sensual and emotional, for one's actions up to a point for one's state of mind. Virtue depends very closely on and is in a sense a function of this sort of moderation. We do not attempt a rigid definition of it, for it develops in different ways in different people, depending on their natural tendencies. The essential nature of moderation is unambiguous, whereas the ways in which this moderation is practiced vary according to different combinations of interior and exterior conditions, social situation, vocation, etc. Meaning, if you're married, if you're single, if you're dating, if you're a widow, you're celibate, the principle is the same, but how you live it's going to be different. Let's go on page 197. We noted earlier that virtue means something, to top in 197. We noted earlier that virtue means something more than merely curbing the promptings of bodily desire or sensual reactions by pushing their content down into the subconscious. Get that? See that? It's very important. Virtue is more than just that. Chastity does not consist in systematic depreciation of the value of the body and sex, any more than it can be identified with the morbid fear which they may inspire, sometimes as a reflex. Such reactions are symptoms not of inner strength, but rather of weakness. Virtue can only come from spiritual strength. You got it? Got the point? What he's saying? This is
your courtship should be virtuous.
yes, which means you can acknowledge and should not be afraid of the fact that you have attraction of feelings. You know? And what? Yes, right, exactly. Education, formation, because the no, they don't. They don't, which is why we're here. And we should be on the Tonight Show or something. We should have on as big a venue as possible.
I see virtue taught in the grammar school. I could say it doesn't in the grammar school.
Yeah.
So they'll say the virtue of the most. What I'm saying is, therefore, they get used to the idea of virtue.
Yes. Yes.
And they grow up with it.
That's good. Yes.
And they also promote frequent confessions.
Mm-hmm.
Monthly confessions for children way up to college. So, because I mean, in other words, if you tell people your relationship to your adults must be virtuous.
Yeah, they don't know what that means.
No.
It's like, well, I'm nice to them. I don't lie. I'm fair. They think like that. You know. This strength derives in the last instance from the reason which sees the real truth about the values and puts the value of the person and love above the values of sex and above the enjoyment associated with them. But for this very reason, chastity cannot consist in blind self-restraint. Continence, efficiency in curbing the lust of the body by the exercise of the will, the capacity for successful moderation of the sensations connected with sensual, even with emotional reactions, is the indispensable method of self-mastery, but it does not in itself amount to a full achievement of virtue. Again, it's not just like, okay, I'm in control, I'm not tempted, I don't see that, I don't do those bad things. That's not enough. Above all, continence cannot be an end in itself. This follows in any case from a general analysis of values and of man's attitude to them. Now, next paragraph. By a value in the objective sense, we mean all that man seeks in his interior life. See, interior life. All that towards which he strives in his activity. So the mere fact of cutting oneself off from certain values, for instance, from those to which sensuality and sentiment are naturally responsive, does nothing to develop the person, unless it results in acknowledgement of the objective order based on experience of the truth about those values. A couple sentences down. Blind self-restraint alone is not enough. There is no valid continence without recognition of the objective order of values. The value of the person is higher than the values of sex. Okay, notice how positive that is? Sex is a high value. It did not say sex is bad, very negative, therefore don't touch it. Sex is a high value, but the person is higher. That's why you exercise continence. You take what is natural and raw, and therefore good, knowing, however, that it has been infected by concupiscence. It can go out of control easily. But you override that, not repress it, but override it and direct it towards the ultimate value, which is the person, to love the person. So you don't have to say, gee, you don't have to feel guilty because I feel these things, or that I like them. You don't have to feel guilty about that in order to be chaste and continent. What you do is you say, I do feel these things, but there's more to it. It's not just these things, these feelings, these attractions. All right. On top of 198. This is the first step on the road to chastity. Continence, subordinated to the process of objectivization, as described above, is necessary if in the midst of the values which appeal to the senses, the value of the person, for which the reason can speak, is to enter consciousness. In other words, again, the objective principle here is the person. And on the first step toward chastity is continence subordinates everything to that objective value of the person. Okay, next, that first paragraph on 198. Therefore, the value of the person must take command, so to speak, of all that happens in a man. When it does, continence is no longer blind. It goes beyond mere self-restraint and interdiction and permits the mind and the will to open up to a value which is both genuine and superior. Thus, objectivization is closely connected with sublimation. See, sublimation is different than repression. Sublimation means you keep it in control, but you don't deny or repress it. You don't stuff it down. You direct it to a higher virtue. I think I told you, I think I've told the story. I tell it many times about a priest friend of mine who we were young associates together. I was sitting in my office one day. He comes in. I don't know what kind of day he was having, but he looked kind of frazzled. He plops down in the chair in my office and he says, you know, Tom, I bet you I could become a saint if I didn't have a sex drive. And I told him, I said, no, Father, it's precisely because you have a sex drive that you can become a saint. In other words, yes, battling the raw material can be tough, sometimes even defeating. But in doing so, by sublimation with continence, the virtues, we come to really be fully human, holy, and loving. And therefore, fully a priest, and in particular, a celibate priest. Or Nun. We would call her a monastic, female monastic in our church, Eastern Church. it's like it's like you're not avoiding something. What you're doing is you're taking that thing with you, but you're taking it to its ultimate height. No, it's not easy. It sounds ideal. Well, it's the way things were meant to be. And I guess it goes back to John Paul's, original man. It's the way we were meant to be. Don't forget. What we consider to be ideal. Oh, that's so ideal. No, that's the real. That's how we were meant to be. It's how we started out, and it's how we're supposed to end up. In between is the struggle. Okay, second paragraph. How does a method of objectivization relate to the need to contain the promptings of the senses, or the senses and the emotions together? Objectivization does not release us from that need. If someone contents himself with objectivization, that is, understanding objectively and correctly the value of the person in relation to sexual values, without at the same time containing the promptings of current desire, he cannot be said to be self-controlled or chaste. How about that one? Yeah, exactly. In other words, if you don't feel, in other words, just, again, it's not how people would see religious life. Oh, well, you go into religious life because oh, no wonder she went and became a nun. No wonder he became a priest. Or they're seen as, and some believe they have to act almost like they're completely asexual. Well, what virtue is that? If you don't feel or have avoided or killed these things in you, that's not where the virtue lies. The virtue lies in the fact that you are like everyone else. You feel these things, but that you've taken them to their ultimate height and destiny, intentionality. See, what's so neat about what he writes, his thought. And this is years ago, decades ago. It gets down to the real thing. It really, is getting us down to understanding things as they truly ought to be understood, and keeping us away from these artificial dualisms. Because remember, if you go to one side, you are necessarily going to produce the opposite reaction. That's why we have to be very careful in the world today. That there is a reaction, among, whatever you want to call them, conservative, whatever. I don't like to use those terms, but you got to be careful of that, because it's good intention. We need it, but we have to be careful that we keep it balanced. Otherwise, you'll produce the other one again. I mean, the sexual revolution came about. What did it follow? Well, okay, there's a lot of things led up to it, but don't forget, it also came out of the 1940s and 50s and things where you just didn't talk about these things. Nice people don't talk about these things. And so people had questions and all this, and then along came the pornified culture and all that, creating temptation in people and more sexual tension, and finally it just blew up. People said, well, the heck with it. I have no answers. This is too much to battle with, and it can't be all this bad. It feels good, so I go with it. So that's why we have to be careful. It must be in the balance. So the balance comes from him. Okay, understanding objectively and correctly evaluate the first relation to the sexual value without the same time containing the promptings of current desires, he cannot be said to be self-controlled or chaste. His behavior would all be theory and no practice. Mere objectivization without continence does not constitute virtue, though continence becomes virtue in the full sense only thanks to objectivization. For man is a being internally so constructed that the promptings of carnal desire do not disappear merely because they are contained by willpower, although superficially appear to do so. For them to disappear completely, a man must know why he is containing them. It may be said that their prohibition is self-justifying. Why not? Because I must not. But this does not solve the problem satisfactorily and does not amount to genuine objectivization. You follow that? That's a very important point. So well articulated. Got that, Kathy? Does that make sense? No, it's not just, don't think about that. It's bad. Okay, I'm not. I'm good. Well, what is that? It's not virtue. You know,
it sounds like the person is doing this almost because there was an arbitrary rule about it, not
yes, right,
because there's some
it-
actual
precisely.
genuine value at
Right,
stake.
right. And what you just articulated, sister, is that is this difference between the shift that happened coming out of the 40s and 50s church, or times, not just the church at times, and entering the 60s, 70s, whatever. And this is why, see, he saw this. He was developing right in that cusp of that. So he knew, oh, we're coming on this thing where you just can't say to people arbitrarily, you won't do this. It's wrong, it's a sin. Okay, because I don't want to go to hell. I won't do it. That was okay to an extent, maybe superficially, but eventually that was going to blow up, and it did. People finally said, I have to know why. His whole thing, our whole message is, in fact, I wrote it in my book right here. This is the why. Like I said, we're there. Look at it right there. It's the star, I actually wrote here. What I just read was, once again, the why of it all. And this is what calls people to virtue, or can inspire them to virtue. It's like, oh, so that's why I'm not supposed to do this. Oh, now there's a sense to it now. It makes sense now, instead of just, he told me not to, and I don't like being told what not to do, and I like being told and feel guilty all the time. That's why people left the church, or just rebelled against it. Just the heck with it. Now we come along with the why. We can speak of objectivization only when the will is confronted by a value which fully explains the necessity for containing impulses aroused by carnal desire and sensuality. All right. So this is what the whole theology of the body, all of John Paul's about, all of why we why we're disciples of his teaching, because bottom line is he provides the why. And that's the best way to learn the how, to live by the how. It makes you want to live by it, because it's beautiful. It's like, wow, that's beautiful. It makes so much sense. It's so ordered. It's so clear. It's just right. Yeah, I want to live like that. Now, as you are practicing this, give just a little hint on what will happen at the bottom of 198, the last sentence there. For it is a fact which we all know from our own life that the practice of self-control and of virtue is accompanied, especially in the early stages, by feeling of loss, of having renounced the value. This feeling is a natural phenomenon. It tells us how powerfully the reflex of carnal desire acts upon the conscious mind and the will. As true love of the person develops, this reflex will grow weaker. The values will return to their proper places. Thus, the virtue of chastity and love of the person are each conditional upon the other. Sister, I'll ask you, because I'll admit to myself, when you make the commitment to religious life, to follow a call from Christ, and you knew you were going to renounce something, right? And that was not superficial. That was very real, wasn't it? Okay, so like he's saying, there will be, yeah, a certain sense of loss in that, but that loss isn't something like, oh gee, I made this commitment to become a celibate. Oh, I'm so miserable. Why did I give up marriage? And it's not that. That will grow weaker, he says, as you live more and more the virtue, the positive. So yeah, there's going to be a natural sense of, and that's what makes it, even in his Theology of the Body, when he deals with celibacy, he talks about that as a witness. That the value of the celibate witness is based upon the fact that marriage is so good. There should be a feeling of loss. There should be a feeling of like, wow, this is a huge decision. I'm never going to be a wife and mother. Never going to be a father or husband, at least in the earthly sense. There should be a tremendous, like Christopher would say, And I want to throw something at him when he says it. No, I'm just joking. But he'll say, the audience, sisters, you priests, I hope you have that ache for. It's easy for you to say, Christopher. Shut up. You're married. No, I'm just joking. But he says it rightfully. In his immersion courses, he'll say that. He'll address those who have made the celibate commitment. He says, I hope you feel that ache for not being married, and because what he means is, he's taking right from John Paul, that's what gives the real value, a witness to your celibacy. Celibacy is an affirmation of the goodness of marriage.
I think that I just said an affirmation of yes, but saying yes to is the God, really, why am I doing that?
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's the why.
But that forgive that is that. I mean, it's not,
Precisely. There's always a no, but the predominant choice is really a yes. Another analogy Christopher will use a lot, which I think is good, is he'll say, if I want you to know me, I want to introduce myself by saying, let's say, okay, I'll say for me, Father Tom Moy. If I wanted you to know me, I wouldn't introduce myself by saying, hello, my name is not Father James. You would know something about me, wouldn't you? But you would only know it in the negative. You would not know anything in the positive. So, but the fact that I say to you, I'm Father Tom, automatically leaves a negative. Well, then he can't be Father James. But it was presented primarily in the positive. So that's kind of like what you're saying. The celibate choice is to be seen primarily in the choice to love, which necessarily will then preclude something else, the so-called loss. But it has to be seen in terms of the positive choice, because that's predominantly the truth. That's the why behind it, and the why is what makes it positive when we understand the why. All right. Let's see here. How are we going? Get through. All right. Okay, we'll read the second paragraph, 199. The sublimation of the emotions plays an important part in this whole process. As we have said, objectivization and sublimation go closely together. The fact that reactions to a person of the other sex may be grounded in sentiment and not only in sensuality in itself favors sublimation. Because of its sensual passion may yield to another form of emotional commitment, free from the preoccupation with the body as an object of enjoyment, characteristic of sensuality. But can sentiment by itself displace sensuality and fashion an attitude to another person solely from its own reactions, or within limits of its own orientation? We know already that this orientation is quite distinct from that which prevails in sensuality. Sentimental desire is not directed solely towards sensual and carnal enjoyment. It is to a much greater extent a desire to be close to a human being of the other sex. But if we leave the spontaneous reactions to take their course, we must reckon the danger of a lapse or relapse from the plane of sentiment to that of sensuality. It is difficult to imagine a sublimation of the sentiments without the participation of reflection and of virtue. Sentiment, however, may play an important auxiliary role in the whole process of sublimation. Now again, in italics, bottom of 199. For the value of the person must be not merely understood by the cold light of reason, but felt. An abstract understanding of a person does not necessarily beget a feeling for the value of the person. Bottom of the last sentence on the bottom of the page. The ability to react spontaneously to the value of human being of their sex, or femininity or masculinity, coupled with the tendency to realize those values, combine fairly easily in one's reactions with the concept of the person, so that it was a spontaneous process of emotional idealization. So that what was a spontaneous process of emotional idealization may cease to center on the values, femininity, masculinity, and center instead on the value of the person. Okay, now we'll go down to the second paragraph on page 200. About midway through the paragraph. Their way of looking at the matter is a proof of great, this is referring to Thomas Aquinas, Aristotle, Their way of looking at the matter is a proof of great experience and practical wisdom. Indeed, every man must effectively deploy the energies latent in his sensuality and his sentiments so they become allies in his striving for authentic love, for they may, as we know, also be its foes. Can you imagine? We're so used to hearing that those are your enemies, and you got to beat down those passions. And he's saying they're allies on the road to virtue. They may become allies in his striving for authentic love, for they may, as we know, also be its foes. This ability to make allies of potential foes is perhaps an even more decisive characteristic of self-mastery and the virtue of chastity than is pure continence. You get that? Whoa. It's kind of like this. And this is part of what we do when, in the whole practice of asceticism, of fasting in the church. Okay? If I'm addicted, let's say this is coffee. Let's say I'm addicted to coffee. I have a sensual, in a sense, a sensual reaction to coffee. I have a passionate. I can't. Okay, sister comes and takes it away from me, knowing that. Okay, I walk out of here feeling satisfied. See, I'm addicted to coffee, but I didn't have one drop of coffee. I am pure. I have restraint. I had restraint, right? Compared to, I'm addicted to coffee. Now I start to exercise certain disciplines, look at it a certain way, so that sister can put this coffee down in front of me, and I come to the point, this is the ultimate goal. Smells good, looks good. Very good. That's all I have today. Which one has more mastery? Which one is more virtuous? The second one, yeah. See, virtue is in allowing yourself to be immersed in life, not seeing anything as bad in itself. Therefore, it has to all be avoided. In fact, ultimately, even for alcoholics, ultimately that's ideally where you would want them to arrive at. Maybe they can't physiologically. I admit that, but I think a lot of them can. I think if they're worked with the right way, they can come to that point where, and this is what we do when we fast, like during Lent. All the ascetical disciplines of the church are for this reason, not so that okay, I gave this up. I embrace this rigorous thing, like the marathon they're gonna run tomorrow. Like I made it, Whew! Now I can go back to eating that thing that I gave up, just the same way I ate it before I gave it up. No, you're supposed to come to Lent, and you can come back to that thing and say, I now have mastery of it. Prior to Lent, this thing had mastery over me. I was either or with it. Either you had to get out of my sight, or I was going to be addicted to it. Now, because I fasted from it and prayed, I can come back to this now where I am in control of it. That's the goal. That when we return to things, we take or leave it. I can maybe never return to it. Only not because I'm addicted, but because I simply choose not to have it. I'm okay without it. You understand? See, so that's what he's saying here. And that's the same thing with relationships, with sensuality, sexuality. And this is that threshold that I call it a threshold that we really have to cross. I think John Paul was beckoning us to with all of his thought on these matters and Theology on that. And that's the part that many people are getting today, and some are maybe misunderstanding or afraid of it. They don't quite understand because there's still that idea that no, you don't look at that ever. Something might go wrong. No, John Paul is saying you don't say anything is bad in of itself. Just like Christopher will always say, our calling when we talk to men says, men, your job is not just to look away. Your job is to learn how to look and not lust, or to see and not lust. So that's the difference. Yeah. Ah.
So they will say to you, you can eat anything you want.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But it's done with a plan.
Very
When
good.
it's done with moderation.
Exactly.
So you can have, you don't have to take.
Well, just proof of my point that Catholic is the answer to everything. That is actually a Catholic approach. It's simply teaching people how to eat moderation in a Catholic ethos, which is always balanced. Yeah.
You must put it in regular in the church.
Right, exactly. Very good. Yes. Right. Because, yeah. Exactly.
So we have a guy online who's saying, is there a prayer or something to meditate on as we work on crossing the threshold from not looking at to being able to look? At work, I have many ladies who dress in such a way that I find myself having to really focus on their eyes or face because of the clothes or the lack of clothes they're wearing.
Okay, good question. The thing that I would do, I would suggest this to you. Memorize this line from the Psalm, from Psalm 103. How many are your works, O Lord, in wisdom you have made them all. And every time you see the ladies, even if you should see that part of them, because sometimes it's just in your face, and by nature, the eye is directed there because of styles. It's a whole other talk. But say that prayer. In other words, respond to that sight sacramentally with prayer. So which will then you will have then mastery over it. It's just a simple line. How many are works, O Lord, in wisdom you've wrought them all. And men, we have to this day because we live in a pornified world, and we have, styles are such that we're faced with this all the time. So you have to learn how if you're faced with it all the time, what are you going to do? Go to work with blindfolds on? Put a bag on your head? How are you going to work? How are you going to drive? It's everywhere, right? That's why the whole thing of don't look, cross the eyes, isn't enough. It's not enough. And if you follow that, if that's what's going to work, then women should all be wearing burqas. And even that won't work. You know why? Because what is the man's greatest sex organ? His brain. He can make it up. He can fantasize. That's where the whole titillation is. It's in the fantasy. That's the whole attraction of pornography. It's fantasy. So really, no matter how much dress or how little dress is not going to be the answer. It can help, yes, but the answer lies in our learning to see sacramentally, to have mastery over this. And the best way is to take it and turn it to prayer. Take it, it leads to prayer. If you can lust instantaneously, if you can have this 1-to-1 ratio of I see something, now I lust, and ultimately it's a choice. So too can you choose in that instant to see something and lead it to prayer. And when I say prayer, I don't mean you're praying to avoid it. What you're doing is you're praying because you see the beauty of it. You see it sacramental. You see the person. You see the marvel of God's creation. He made this beautiful thing that you're seeing in front of you or is being thrown in your face that you didn't ask for. That's a lot of women don't understand today. Men are not asking women to dress provocatively. But when they do, the man now has something thrown in his mental lap that he has to deal with. Okay, so if it's thrown in your face, then connect it with its sacramentality. Connect it with it as a sign of God's creation, and the best way is to express that through prayer. So it's just one verse in the psalm, and you'll learn to see. And believe me, it will take you beyond it. You will be able to look and see. When I say look, I don't mean like looking at it. You'll just be able to. Okay, it's there, but it's not like it becomes prayer. It becomes an opportunity. Turn it into an opportunity of prayer. And if you practice it, it will work. I guarantee it'll work. But do it not just for women you work with. Do it with anything. I mean, we should be exploding with prayer these last few weeks. Have you seen the sunsets, the sunrises? Have you seen the stars at night, the last several nights? Have you seen the colors of the leaves? We should be exploding with prayer. The same reaction to those things should be the same reaction as to whether it's a human body or it's stars in the sky. You're seeing something that is true, good, and beautiful, and the natural response is prayer, if you're seeing it that way. So that's what I'd recommend. And that's really what he's saying, too.
I think that idea of it's almost like the consecration of mass.
Yes.
The matter,
Yes.
whether it's the matter that's being presented, before a person's eyes, or the matter held in the hands, it's consecrated.
Right. Right.
There's a transformation
Yes. Exactly.
through this invocation.
And we see it that way. You accept it that way. You respond with prayer, right? You're not just, oh, this is just a piece of bread.
Yeah.
You don't, right? You know this is Christ. Does it look like Christ? I don't know. It looks like a piece of bread to me. But yet you're seeing it with sacramental eyes. Maybe that's the place I need to go to more to help people understand. Because otherwise, like friends, I can play the devil's advocate, like some of our non-Catholic friends do. Like, you Catholics are cannibals. You're telling me that's really the body and blood of Christ, really his body and blood? Oh my God, gross. You eat bones and flesh and drink human blood? You're cannibals, right? Okay, defend against that now. Tell me how I'm wrong. What would you have to do? What would you have to explain to that person? The way you would explain it is exactly what we're saying about how to see the human body. Exactly. So if we can do it Eucharistically, that's why I call this the Eucharistic worldview. See all the way we see Eucharist. Then you got it. If you can see Eucharist and explain it, then you can do that for everything. Why not? And just think, what just illustrates the point. When we're eating his body and blood, it didn't say we're also eating his clothes, his loincloth, right? Right? We're eating his body. Don't want to say naked, not in a literal sense. We're eating his body, taking his body into us and ours into him, and his blood. So how do we explain that? That it's not cannibalism? Right. Yeah. You're getting onto it. Right. See, it's hard for us in a sense because we just know it to be true, but hard to articulate because it's a great mystery. Which I think you're driving at is this: the way you explain it is that you have to see the bread and the wine. Yes, it is still that physical substance that we know on earth as bread. It didn't turn into it didn't all of a sudden turn into a bone in your hand. It remains in that particular state as bread, but it now we now see it because in fact it does become. We see it sacramentally as we see what it's really pointing to or participating in. Its ultimate its ultimate quality now is not just the bread. Its ultimate quality, the truth about this now is that it is the body of Christ. In order to see that, you have to look at it sacramentally. You cannot look at it just for what you see in front of you. Same with the human body. That's the whole theology of the body. It's not just the flesh and bone. It's not just this body with all of its sensuality and sexual parts. It's a theology. It's a temple of the Holy Spirit. It points to God's transcendence, his immanence, by virtue of us being man and woman. Is it just sex organs coming together? No. It is what? What is really seeing there? Look at it sacramentally. It's persons coming together through and including their bodies. What's going on there is something sacramental. It's the exchange, the gift of persons. So you see it in the bread and wine. You see it in the marital act. Well, then keep going. Don't stop there. See it everywhere. See it in a flower. See it in the stars. See it in a scientific, discovery. See it in what they find under microscopes, or through telescopes. See, our tendency is to be able to do it over here, but not over here. We stop short of doing it with the human body. We can, I believe in you. That's the body and blood of Christ, but you can't see the human body that way as sacramental. Yeah, it will, which is why we have to keep teaching this and forming, not just teaching, forming people. It has to become the paradigm of everything. Seminaries,
Before,
even before, yes, especially before. That's why I say it. Bringing kids up in this is one of the most important things. An ethos beyond the body. I call it three principles: wonderment, gratitude, and gift. Yes, wonderment, gratitude, and gift. Bring children up in that ethos, and what will happen is this will just be natural to them. You won't have to teach them. Like, oh yeah, well, what's the big deal? Of course, yeah. All right. All right, tenderness. Last section will be tenderness and sensuality. It's an interesting little bit here. Tenderness and sensuality. What is tenderness? Look on page 201, the top, first paragraph. We feel tenderness for a person, or for that matter, towards some unreasoning being, such as an animal or plant, when we become conscious of the ties which unite us. At the bottom of that first paragraph, page 201. It is especially in relationships between two human beings that one of them is able to and feels the need to enter into the feelings, the inner state, the whole spiritual life of the other, and is able and needs to make the other aware of this. These are precisely the functions of tenderness. Tenderness is more than just an inner capacity for compassion, for sensitive awareness of another person's feeling and state of mind. Tenderness includes all this. See how it always gets deep into what a word really means? That's the key. Tenderness includes all these things, but its essence is elsewhere, in a tendency to make one's own the feelings and mental states of another person. This tendency seeks outward expression. I feel the need to let the other I know that I take his feelings and his state of mind to heart, to make this other human being feel that I am sharing it all, that I am feeling what he feels. Tenderness then springs from awareness of the inner state of another person, and indirectly of that person's external situation, which conditions his inner state. And whoever feels it actively seeks to communicate his feeling of close involvement and the other person, with the other person and his situation. This closeness is a result of an emotional commitment. The analysis carried out in the last chapter showed that sentiment enables us to feel close to another I. Sentiment naturally brings people closer together. Okay, bottom of 202. A very clear distinction must be drawn between tenderness and the various ways in which it manifests itself on the one hand and various means of satisfying the demands of sensuality on the other. The origins and objectives are quite different. Sensuality is naturally oriented towards the body as a possible object of sexual enjoyment and aims at satisfying this need for enjoyment in a natural way. This is called finding a sexual outlet. Tenderness, on the other hand, comes from sentiment and is characteristic reaction to a human being of the other sex. It is not an expression of concupiscence, but of benevolence and devotion. Let's see. Now, on page 204. Can we speak of a right to tenderness? The expression must be taken to mean, on the other hand, the right to receive tenderness, on the other hand, the right to show it. We speak deliberately of a right rather than a duty in the second as well as the first case, although there undoubtedly also exists a duty in some circumstances to show tenderness towards another human being. Thus, tenderness is the right of all those who have a special need for it, the weak, the sick, those who are in any way afflicted physically or morally. It would seem that children to whom it is a natural way of showing love, though this is true not only of them, have a special right to tenderness. Okay, further down in that paragraph. For this reason, genuine human love, love for a person, and love between persons must combine two elements, tenderness and a certain firmness. Otherwise, it will lose its inner soundness and resilience and turn into sterile sloppiness and mawkishness. We must not forget that love for a human being must also contain certain elements of struggle. Struggle for the beloved human being and his or her true good. Bottom of the page, last sentence. Clearly, tenderness has no raison d'etre outside of love. Save in love, we have no right to show or receive tenderness. Its exterior manifestations are empty gestures. In other words, we can feign or act tender, but if it's not about real love, then it's empty. It's phony.
Like the nun in Chaucer.
Yes.
So like walk by the beggars like this because you got all weepy over the dog.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah. And also, I was going to bring this up, and he did too on page 205, halfway down the first paragraph. The seducer's methods usually included the display of tenderness, just as the coquette tries to play on the senses, though in both these cases, genuine love of the person is absent. So I was going to say too that the tenderness thing, that was that's a technique used by the predator pedophiles. But see, it's not a love-based thing. So, yeah, strategic, exactly. Again, utilitarian is very strategic, and that was a big factor in their thing. They really feigned a tenderness towards a victim who they sensed had need for affection and so on. Okay, towards the bottom of the first paragraph on 205. In young people, the divergence between these two internal processes is normally greater than in older and generally mature people. In people endowed with a lively and ardent temperament, people of the sanguine type, for instance, the emotion of love is a sudden and powerful explosion, and the cultivation, education of virtue requires an effort so much the greater for that. Okay, I'm going to go to bottom of 206, and we're going to run into a paragraph, the end of which is going to be a famous, famous phrase from John Paul II. This is on page 206, the last sentence on the bottom of the page. A great deal of tenderness of this kind is needed in marriage, in that life together in which it is not only a body that needs a body, but a human being that needs a human being. Tenderness has a very important role to play here. Organically, combined with genuine love of the person and disinterested, in other words, there's no strings attached, it has the power to deliver love from the various dangers implicit in the egoism of the senses and the hedonistic attitude. Tenderness is the ability to feel with and for the whole person. Here comes this great phrase. To feel even the most deeply hidden spiritual tremors, and always to have in mind the true good of that person. What a beautiful definition, isn't it? The ability to feel with and for the whole person. To feel even the most deeply hidden spiritual tremors. What a great phrase, the spiritual tremors. That's going deep in someone, And tenderness is able to feel that. Whenever I read this, and I've been using this example more and more, especially in marriage and family counseling. it may seem like a cliche, almost like so obvious, or just, I don't know. But this tenderness, this feeling of the spiritual tremors, that to me is the best way I would describe. And I often will ask couples. I'll ask couples or families. If I'm doing couple or family therapy, I'll say, I want you to picture in your mind now. I want you to tell me. I want you to articulate a day in the life of the Holy Family. From the time they get up to the time they go to bed. What? How do you just picture their interaction? The whole atmosphere in the home. But to me, it would be best summarized with this whole definition of tenderness. I just could see Mary and Joseph and Christ, but it seemed between Mary and Joseph, the two of them being so totally in touch with each other's deepest needs and feelings, so deferential. It must have just been a constant interplay of deference between the three of them, all day, all night. That's how I would imagine it to be. And then this tenderness definition, to me, it just kind of summarizes it, puts the tone. I color it with that tone, tenderness, the Holy Family. And then I work with the family, so okay, we're now going to try to make that your model. You're a Holy Family. Are you not a Catholic family or Christian family? So your model is that. Your model is this type of deep tenderness and deference. Now let's proceed on some practical steps how we're going to do that. It was surprised how that should be like the obvious model, but you have to bring them back to that. You have to remind them, this is what you are. Your family is to be modeled after the Holy Family. And how do you envision they acted? What was their interaction? Okay, we'll finish this chapter and we'll read this last paragraph on page 207 to the end. He kind of sums it up. It may nevertheless seem strange that our discussion of tenderness forms part of a chapter devoted to the problem of continence. Yeah, it's like, why did he bring tenderness into continence? But the connection is a close one, and the discussion is in its proper place. There can be no genuine tenderness without a perfected habit of continence, which has as its origin in a will always ready to show loving kindness, and so overcome the temptation merely to enjoy, put in its way by sensuality and carnal concupiscence. Without such continence, the natural energies of sensuality and the energies of sentiment drawn into their orbit will become merely the raw material of sensual or at best emotional egoism. This must be very clearly and emphatically stated. Life teaches us this lesson at every step. For believers, what lies behind this fact is the mystery of original sin, the consequences of which are particularly grave in the sphere of sex, and are a threat to the person, the greatest good in the created universe. Yeah, that's something. This danger is, so to speak, a very near neighbor of love. For true love of unit of persons may develop from just the same raw material as a semblance of love, which merely masks an inner attitude, an egoism which is the contrary of love. Continence plays here a very important and positive part, in that it liberates us from that attitude and from egoism, and so indirectly creates love. Love between man and woman cannot be built without sacrifices and self-denial. We find the formula for this renunciation of the gospel in the words of Christ. Whoever would follow me must first renounce his own self. The gospel teaches continence as a way of showing love. That'll bring us to our next chapter. We'll start on marriage next time. That's on page 211. But to sum up, you see, what I love about this, what is so significant, is that it just he brings us to not just the rules, the do's and the don'ts, but the whole why, the whole deep underlying value of the do's and don'ts. Like he said here, it's not don't do something just for the sake of don't, that's the end in itself. It's like don't do this because it will not lead you then to the ultimate honest virtue of love and respect of persons, which ultimately will bring us unhappiness. Rather do this because it will engage you. It will bring about that intimacy, that love, that happiness that we all desire. And this is why I say, like in the church, we don't have rules. We have a way of life. And there's a way to live. There's specific ways that will get you into that life, to live that life. But it's not a system of do's and don'ts. Mm.
He would present to you in a more, if you would present a more of the learner than him, he would present to you all the time.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Woody, yeah. Oh,
What a
see?
great success.
Yeah, exactly. He's bringing you to, really, that's what he's bringing you to the choice. Again, always like Deuteronomy. I put before you life or death. Choose life. What are you going to choose? Yeah, it's great, Professor, in that sense. Here is the principle. Here's the scenario. Here is what do you choose? I give you the why behind it. Now you choose it. Either choose it or don't. Like I'm sure some young people, that's part of what inspired all this stuff is, young people saying as they do to me, Father, how far do I go on a date? What is moral or not moral, And like you said in here, it's not always like some fast rule, but, specific, it's more like the principle. So I give them the principle. I say, okay, think of it this way. What is the reality of your situation? Which really challenges our whole approach to dating today, that it's, dating becomes mock marriage today. It becomes the element that I try to teach them is that dating has an exclusivity to it. Why are you being exclusive? You're not going to marry this person. The reason you're being exclusive, you know what dating really means. This is the person with whom I have the most intimate physical contact. That's really what dating means today in terms of how they live it. That I go the furthest with this person, and we can do it on a regular basis. When you think about it, what else is there for the exclusivity? It's sort of a using of one another, which kids, at young age, they have to learn because they're so driven by the hormones and the need and all that. They just need to be taught. Um, so the exclusivity, I ask them, okay, are you okay? Certain gestures say that we are exclusive. Are you exclusive? Can you be exclusive? Are you married? Are you going to get married? Well, no. Then that action that says you are married would not be honest. You'd be lying to each other, and that's going to be bad for your relationship and your soul. So that's how I do it, And then I said, what about, they get like a little specific. But what about what kind of kissing? When can I kiss? How can I handle it? Well, what does that kiss mean? What does this gesture mean? What is a kiss? There are different kinds of kisses that communicate different things. Um, what when it communicates, is it consistent with the reality? And that's how you help them come to, like you're saying, like keyword, a moral discernment, not just like, no, don't do this because you'll endanger your soul and go to hell. Yeah, that's part of it, and we need a little, and we do need some of that. That's part of it. I'm not excluding that, but it doesn't bring you to real virtue. See, our goal here is, and I'm going to take a, he has it in Theology Body too. It's a strong concept in the Eastern spirituality of divinization. In other words, our call in life is a continual, we're continually transforming into our real selves, our most real selves. Okay? And that's like an ongoing process. So everything is geared at trying to avoid what interrupts that process or retards it, and instead helps to increase it. So it's a matter of the moral decisions or the do's and don'ts are really based on, okay, this is going to impede your progress toward your real self, which is your sainthood, your sanctity. So you try to get across to them that there's more to it than just do's and don'ts, or that, you try to, like I said before, you try to base it on the positive, not just don't do this because you'll endanger your soul and go to hell. You'll be in danger of mortal sin. Okay, I'm not dismissing that. That's a part of it. But it's like, do we drive safely only because if we don't, we might get arrested and put in jail or fined? Is that the only reason you drive safely? I mean, that helps us to drive safely. But if that's the only reason you go safely, could you call yourself a safe driver? I never got arrested. Are you a safe driver, though? A safe driver would be the one that would not need the policeman or the threat, but they drive because they know that I drive safely because I love other people. I'm to be deferential and charitable to others, not to endanger their lives as well as my own. That would be the safe driver. So you want to give them, okay, you give them the rules. Okay, you drive on the right side of the lane. You don't drive on the oncoming thing, not just for the end in itself, like saying continence is just the end in itself. Because if you drive on that lane, the cars are coming towards you, you're going to get in an accident. Bad things will happen, okay? So that's why there's a rule that you only drive on the right. So the rule is not the end in itself. The rule simply reminds us or points to the why, the benevolent why behind everything. Okay? So that's the Catholic ethos. That's the moral ethos. And we become truly moral to the degree in which we do the right thing because we're doing it out of the why, the virtue, not just because we're trying to avoid hell and get to heaven. It's a part of it, not dismissing it. But it's got to be more genuine than that.
Nothing wrong. She went, oh no. It was a very good example. They took and they said they're trying to get the point across that if you are in a relationship and you're 17 and you don't marry, then you leave that person to go to the next person. You leave that person to go to the next person. You have to see and put it together to kind of hide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Precisely. And that's even a chemically based thing, because of the bonding hormone. And this is the emotional antecedents, as it were, of premarital sex. This is what people understand. Exactly right, what you're saying. And that's why when you come to marriage, when you should bond, guess what? You're not bonding. This is why marriages don't bond. Part of it. One reason. So you see, the great why is all about wanting the best for people, wanting people to be happy, not hurt. It's not easy. We know that. It's not easy. But like you said, that's why we need the graces. Okay, great. Well, we'll hit it next time we get into marriage and some other even more relevant and detailed things. I'd be amazed. People will say, he had to have been married or something, or had to have been having sex or something. How does he know? How can he know this stuff? He's celibate. Well, proof positive that sexuality is about God. So the more you know about God, the more you know about sexuality. Real simple. Yes. Yeah, taborlife.org. Tabor, Tabor life.org. And by the way, I'm back on live in Chicago again on 10 o'clock on Tuesdays on Radio Maria. It's 12:40 a.m. on the dial. AM 12:40. It's 10 o'clock on Tuesdays. Live hour show, which I do all this stuff. But yeah, taborlife.org would be the website for some of the stuff on there. It's called Beyond the Veil. Beyond the Veil on the World Family Radio Maria, AM 1240, WSBC. We'll be back in a moment. Thank you.
We'll be back in November.
Yeah, great. What are you going to say, Captain? Yeah.
Okay, looking for something particular.